When I was able to really look at the situation and be able to use the words, I said yes, I gave him this. When I was able to take responsibility for something where I had been placing blame on someone else, everything shifted for me.
Welcome to Simple Sense for Small Business, where we talk about sometimes mistakes we make in business, and we like to touch on some everyday occurrences that, unbeknownst to us, we could stumble upon and then find ourselves kind of struggling a little bit. So I like to talk to people that are exciting to me and that I've learned from in some way, shape, or form. And that is the case today with Nancy Levin, who is the author of a few books, but the book that caught my attention was Worthy. But you also have Jump and Your Life Will Appear, and you worked at Hay House for 14 years, a publishing company. And Louise Hay, I have chills just thinking about her. She's such a treasure, and she kind of saved my life back in 2005 emotionally. And through some of her books and her meditations, I still turn that on and I'm like, her voice is calming. And sometimes I fall right asleep, and I'm okay with that because she says it's okay if you fall asleep. So Nancy, thank you so much for being here and for agreeing to talk with me today. If you would just please share anything and everything you like to about your book journey, your business journey, your coaching journey, all of it.
Thanks for having me. And I will say that Louise used to love people coming up to her to tell her, I sleep with you every night.
So brilliant.
You're in good company. As you mentioned, I was the event director at Hay House for over a decade, and I produced all of our live events in person around the world. So I always say I had a backstage pass and a front row seat to all of the leading minds in the field of self-empowerment, self-improvement, health, wellness. And yet it wasn't until I went through my own crisis that I was really able to step in and take full advantage of all the teachings I had been witnessing. And while I had been sort of, drinking everything in by osmosis, there was a pivotal time in my life when I really needed support. And I have been a writer my whole life. I've kept a journal since I was 11 years old. I always thought my writing was privately for me. And I even have a master's in poetry, but I really never thought that I would publish. It wasn't something that was on the radar for me. And what I really loved to do was create experiences for people. In my position at Hay House, I was really extremely fulfilled. I thought I had my dream job. I would be in that job till I died. And then the proverbial shit hit the fan, and I blew up my marriage. And all the details about that are in really essentially all my books. And the very first episode of my podcast, Your Permission Prescription, I really detail blowing up my marriage and really how Louise Hay helped me. But the long story short is ultimately that my now ex-husband read my journals. And so there was a period of time where, because I was such a perfectionist, I wanted to project this image of perfection to the world. I wanted everyone to see me through a very specific lens, that I was very invested in never letting anyone see me sweat. I didn't want anyone to know what was going on behind closed doors. I spent a good 2 years really trying to keep the marriage together. And then ultimately I decided to leave. And that experience was what really shifted me internally. I'll share a little bit just to give you a sense of what we're working with here. My husband had read my journals, had discovered I'd had an affair 8 years earlier. And he was really invested in punishing me. And there was really an uneven dynamic in terms of the way that our personalities worked. And one thing is, he was a very dirty fighter. I wasn't a fighter. While I was a powerhouse at work, I was quiet as a mouse at home. He was very controlling, and I allowed myself to be in his cage of rage. And so when I finally left, one of the authors at Hay House with whom I was quite close, Debbie Ford, had recommended that I, instead of producing her next event, that I actually, participate. And so it was that first weekend workshop that I did with Debbie, called the Shadow Process, which was her sort of signature event. I did that workshop, let my staff produce the event, and that was really the moment that I was willing to look at what changes I needed to make in my life. Really getting clear about what I needed to take responsibility for, and how could I craft for myself a life where my needs were being taken into account. After doing that weekend workshop with Debbie Ford, I ultimately decided to work with one of her coaches, and that supported me through my divorce process. And then I decided I wanted to take her coach training and certification program. So I did this while I was in my full-time job at Hay House. And I did it because I really wanted to know myself more deeply. I wanted to really know my inner world, my inner landscape. It wasn't that I ever anticipated coaching as a career. Like I said earlier, I thought I would, die in my job at Hay House. But on the other side of that training, I was unrecognizable. And I really felt called to help other people make meaningful change and get free.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you because I'm taking little notes, because one of the reasons why I was so compelled to reach out to you, besides while listening to your book twice, was I thought we could be best friends. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was everything you just said and the things that you share in the book. I have felt that, or I've experienced kind of the same thing. The people pleasing, approval seeking. I was the eldest in the family. So it was like, take care of your little sister or babysit this kid or, whatever. So I had these, I think early on adopted these caretaking issues. And my relationships have historically consistently been very broken. And I journaled a lot too, which helped me to then write a memoir. But one thing in your book that I'd like to start with is you had mentioned how early of an age you were when you had an epiphany of independence and financial independence. And I think it was 2, where you said, I kind of felt like I was going to have to take care of myself financially. So mine came at 13, and mine was, you have to do well in school so you can go to college. So you better get good grades, because then you have to graduate college so you can get a good job, so you can save money and have money for retirement just in case nobody's around. So when you told this story and how young you were, when did you, besides writing the book, when did this come back to you? Like, oh, this is the source.
So my experience of being 2 years old when my 6-year-old brother died.
Oh, that's yes, he had died that early, right?
Right. So the beliefs that I imprinted were, better I be self-sufficient, better I not have any needs, and ultimately a belief of no one will ever take care of me. They may not have originally related to finances. However, as the subtitle of Worthy states, boost your self-worth to grow your net worth, that there is an interconnection between the way that we value ourselves and what we allow ourselves to have and receive. And so at a very early age, I really shut myself down to what would be possible to receive, and felt that I would need to be in the position of always giving and ultimately over giving. It wasn't really until I was deep doing this inner work on myself, I want to say like maybe early mid 40s, when I was leaving my marriage, and that I was really looking at all of this. And then I share in Worthy, I believe it's in chapter 7, about the experience of going through a mediation. And
yes.
significant turning point in my life.
So now the book was not, you hadn't started the book Worthy yet.
No. So when I was still in my position at Hay House, I ended up self-publishing a book of poems. So that was my first book. After that book, I started my second book, which is Jump and Your Life Will Appear. And I was sort of in the process of self-publishing that book when it became clear to me that I really wanted to coach. I wanted to leave my job. I wanted to, sort of break out on my own. In February of 2014, I self-published Jump and Your Life Will Appear. And a couple months later, Reed called me and said, "Hey, your book is doing really well. Hay House would like to pick it up." So that was very exciting. So I essentially spent, the next few months training the woman who was going to take my job, getting everything in place before I left. And then I left my position at Hay House in August of 2014.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it feel like yesterday a little bit?
I mean, it feels like both, because I have to say it took me
true.
a long time to detox from the way I operated. So, I'll share that, the sequence of my books, the next book I wrote was Worthy, and that published in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
The next book after that I wrote is called The New Relationship Blueprint, which was republished in paperback as Permission to Put Yourself First.
Oh,
so that was the next book. And then I wrote a book that published in January of 2020 called Setting Boundaries Will Set You Free.
Yep, I saw that.
Yep.
I'm putting all the links in the show notes and the video description.
Great.
There's going to be a link to your Amazon store as well and your website.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah.
And then my most recent book, the sixth book I published, was in September of 2022, called The Art of Change. One of the things I recognized in leaving my job and being out on my own was how I had for decades believed that my boundarylessness is what made me exceptional at my job.
Boundaryless.
Boundaryless.
So it was almost like, yes, I'm saying yes to everything, or you're flexible, agile, and
I mean, I was literally the queen of the impossible. I would reply to an email basically even before it came in. And, I was really living in that way. So it took me quite a long time to decompress, to stop being on high alert, to stop chasing external validation. And really, if I go all the way back to the experience of going through that mediation, the divorce mediation, which happened in October 2010, the real pivotal moment for me is right then and there is when I really got that self-worth, net worth connection. And I got that because I couldn't stand up for myself in the mediation, because I trusted a lawyer who, it turns out, did not have my best interest at heart, who essentially told me one thing and did another. And ultimately, I ended up saying yes to all of the bullet points.
Yeah, the demands.
And because I didn't even know I could say no.
Wow.
I didn't know I could say no. I didn't know I could say to my lawyer and the mediator, "Hey, I want to postpone this. This is bullshit. This is not what I agreed to with my lawyer. And now my lawyer's coming in, doing something different, and I'll bring Louise Hay back into this because she's I really learned my appreciation for precision of language from her. Wow. I spent quite a lot of time with her, and the precision of language is something that I really pay attention to. And for quite a while, I was saying things like, I had to give him X, or I had to do this. And then when I was able to really look at the situation and be able to use the words, I said yes, I gave him this. When I was able to take responsibility for something where I had been placing blame on someone else, everything shifted for me.
I can't start crying, but I can't not get choked up here just feeling and understanding what that must have, because I've been there and I've done it. And then I had all this resentment.
And so resentment rising is a telltale sign a boundary needs to be put into place.
Yes. So
Right. And really resentment shows us that we crossed our own boundaries in some way.
I'm just learning now about how strong resentment is as a silent disruptor, in a sense, of our emotions and our mental capacity, our mindset.
Yeah.
And we don't even know that we're doing it to ourselves because we're so busy externally blaming outside influences or circumstances.
Yes.
Had I known stuff like this 30 years ago, who knows, right? But you can't go back.
Right.
You have to just give yourself some grace, be grateful for the wisdom, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like whenever we are stuck in that place of blame, we are stuck in victimhood. Then, the flip side is to be in the place of taking responsibility, and therefore we are empowered. And what you just said about, had I known this younger, I now, and for the past 5 years, have been running my own life coaching certification school. It originated because Debbie Ford died. She actually died about 10 years ago now. I had a lot of people coming to me to coach with me who were coaches, but had come to me saying, I don't know how to get a client, and I wouldn't even know what to do with a client when I got one. So I recognized that there was a real need for a coach training that allowed the students to actually feel very skilled and prepared. And that was what was going to allow them to have success. So the preparation piece, and also the experience of them going through their own inner work first as part of the program. And I'm always overjoyed when people come into my program who are in their 20s.
Yes.
I'm like overjoyed, because I'm like, if I had known any of this in my 20s, life would have been very different.
I would love to ask you a couple things, since I work with a lot of business owners, and your book is not the what to do with money, but how to feel about money. It can get messy if you're not clear on your intentions. How do you discern, or how do you change your mindset especially if you're feeling a lack of, or a scarcity, if you have a scarcity mindset?
Yeah. So there's a couple things I'll bring up. One is, again, going back to those shadow beliefs that I had mentioned earlier. We're all imprinted with these beliefs that we grow up with, and they originate when a significant event occurs when we're young, and we're too young to really process and digest what's happening. So we draw a conclusion about ourselves. So I always like to go back and begin with what were the messages you experienced around money? What did you notice in terms of your family of origin? How did they talk about money? How did they talk about people with money or people without money? Where did your family go out to eat? Where did your family shop? What do you make it mean about having money or not having money? Many people grow up with a belief that having money is bad. People grow up with, equating having money to the greedy family who lived down the street. In order to feel okay about having money, I have to personally earn it. Or whatever it looks like. But we first want to go in and just see, what are the earliest messages you remember seeing or hearing or interpreting about money, and what did you make all of it mean about you? And how is it still running your life today? So that's sort of one area. Another area is underlying commitments. If there's a discrepancy between what I say I want and what I'm actually experiencing, there is an old, outdated underlying commitment at play. We need to actually look at our strongest commitments, because I fully believe we are completely capable of creating what we are most committed to. The problem is, most people do not actually know what they're most committed to. Now, if we look at the choices I make and the actions I take that take me away from what I want, that are, in a sense, in alignment with what I'm experiencing, I will discover what I'm most committed to. And so it's not about willpower or discipline. It's about realigning your true commitment with what it is you want.
So what is the rumbling that says, oh, this is how I'm going to then make more? Or how do you know what I'm saying? Like how do
So the bottom line is that what you're talking about is not based in reality. It's based in magical thinking. There has to be actually a pull back and a wide lens on what is the vision I'm holding and where is my focus and how will I actually create something that will allow me to have this business be sustainable.
Okay. Now, that brings me to, in the book, step 1, there are 10. Take off the blinders is the step 1. And in step 1, I believe, is where you have 39 beliefs that you give and you provide. Not to mention, you have a very healthy, hefty supplemental document PDF that you can download. It's a very generous resource that you provide with the book. And there's 39 beliefs that you give about, I don't look at interests,
Right.
the interest I'm earning. I don't.
Behaviors. They're
behaviors.
patterns of behavior.
You know, bringing that to the awareness, are you finding like step 1 alone helps with your readers and some of the people that you consult and coach?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to start somewhere. You have to be willing to look at where do I have my blinders on?
Yeah.
And you have to start looking at what behaviors am I willing to change?
Is there a favorite step that you think has resonated most with people?
Step 9.
Step 9, hold on, let's go to the tape. Uncover your desires, financial and otherwise.
Yeah,
so that's where it starts getting fun, right?
There's an exercise in this chapter called 50 Desires.
Oh,
and
yes.
I have, and I don't know when this is airing, but I am holding a 50 Desires workshop in March where I will actually be taking you through this specific process. It's one of the pieces of worthy coaching. But one of the reasons I think it's so important is that, it's all well and good to say, it's okay to have needs, consider what you want, because that really is part of my message. Then there's inevitably some kind of feeling of, well, I don't even know what I want. I know this well because, as I alluded to earlier, I was in a marriage with a man who was extremely controlling about my body, my weight, what I wore, what I ate, how I moved my body. There was a lot of control going on. So when I was ultimately on my own, I didn't know what I wanted. This exercise called 50 Desires originated out of my own personal experience. We're the ones who sort of tamp down our wants because we get into the belief system of, well, if I want something, I won't have it, so why bother wanting? And so that's what I love about step 9 is getting in, and it's obviously later in the process because there's 10 steps. We have to go through all the other steps to get there, but there's something really potent and powerful to pay attention to desires that are solely for ourselves, not for others.
Would you say those desires are always there and then you just have to unearth them, or you don't even know that they're there?
I think the desires are there and the desires are accessible. They're within our reach. Really give yourself permission to consider your own needs. Consider your own needs at least as much as you're considering the needs of others, at least as much. And that for some people will be a stretch. Then give yourself permission to consider your needs even more than you consider the needs of others. And then the real ninja move here is give yourself permission to consider your needs first before you consider the needs of others. If I say to you, hey, Linda, let's go out to dinner, where do you want to go? What's the first sort of natural response?
It's okay, what do you want? Yeah,
exactly. And what would it be like to actually pause and think, I want sushi tonight.
So you're saying you would even concede, even if somebody wanted to go sushi, but you don't like sushi.
Yeah, it's not so much even concede. It's really like if you're willing to say, hey, I really want sushi. And I say to you, I'm actually allergic to fish. I can't eat sushi. Then we can go into a collaboration.
Yeah.
But if you just turn it over to me, what do I want? You acquiesce. You give in. And we give in for all sorts of reasons. We don't want conflict. We don't really know what we want. And that's why I'm really advocating for this invitation to pause and look at, what do I really want? Even by saying, I don't care, whatever you want, by appearing easygoing.
It could be a lie. It could be a lie.
Right. Of course. I know for decades of my life, I tried to earn and prove my worth by what I produced, what I did. All the things I could do were the way that I felt worthy and of value to others. And the bottom line is, when we are sort of putting our worth in someone else's hands, it's very precarious.
Well, that's, again, goes back to then resentment pops up and we're like, why am I feeling like this? And it's like, because we breached our own boundary.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I speak very clearly about, if your boundaries are being crossed, you are the one crossing. There is no someone else crossing my boundaries.
Right.
It's not anyone else's responsibility to uphold our boundaries, to even respect our boundaries. It's up to us.
So here's one last question for you. When there's a business owner that is outwardly stating that they either aren't making enough money, or they don't have enough money, or there's always not enough money, but they're running a business and they're making money, but talking about how it's never enough. Do you hear this often? And are you dealing with mainly people that are just personally trying to?
No, I work with business owners, and I work with individuals, and I work with people in corporate settings as well. And that's why I'm saying it's got to come back to the vision that you're holding and what is realistic. And I have what I call my transformation equation, which is change equals vision plus choice plus action. If you are in a circumstance that you want to change, it's essential to get clear on the vision that you're holding, and then make a different choice and take a different action. But just complaining, or worrying is the most useless activity. Taking action will alleviate anxiety, worry, and overwhelm. Realize the change you want to make. Create for yourself a plan of action that correlates to the vision you're holding. The vision becomes the map. The vision becomes the gauge by which you make your choices and take your actions. Bottom line, every choice we make and every action we take does only one of two things: serves us or sabotages us. So if one finds oneself in a situation that is not sustainable, it comes down to choice and action.
Thank you so much for being so articulate with something that so many, either where we've overcome some struggles, or we're still working on it, or we've really covered a lot of ground to then not feel as overwhelmed with some of the negative, useless emotions.
Right.
So I want to say thank you. And I would like to ask you, where can people find you? Where would you like to point them to find? There's going to be links below, all of that fun stuff, but where are you?
My website is nancylevin.com. Everything is there. I have a free bi-weekly newsletter called The Practice, which is really for anyone who is a life coach, aspiring life coach, or someone who wants to use life coaching skills to enhance their current career. I have that free newsletter that is available on my website. I have many free guides. I've got a podcast. I've got books. All the things are on my website.
Thank you for allowing me to politely stalk you and accepting my invitation to spend time.
Of course.
No, she's got to go. So
very brief comment.
Hurry up, because we're closing this out.
I'll tell you what really resonated with me just in the last couple of minutes. What you talked about in terms of the boundaries, vision. This is how I met the most amazing woman who has ever been in my life.
Who is she? What?
I created a written action plan. I reviewed it every morning. If I was having a bad day, I reviewed it multiple times throughout the day. Literally, it said WIW, what I want.
Yeah. Well,
and I set timelines.
Right. I'll just, give a little plug for my latest book.
Oh, yeah.
Change. So it's a guided journal, but it's really robust. It's very, very robust. And it's got 8 different sections, but you start this with vision and then it moves you into action.
And it's a
Fantastic.
book.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
really,
thank you.
Really
My pleasure.
amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Trevor, for joining us.
Yes, thanks, Trevor.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And I can't wait to get all your books.
Thank you.
And subscribe to your podcast. So thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you next time.